Hey, friends in the Boss Hole Transformation Nation, welcome back to part 2 of our episode interviewing Amanda Schneider, focused on her book, Work for What's Next, Why Workplace Culture is Failing, and How the Next Generation Can Fix It. I hope you were able to listen to part 1 and you were riveted because part 2 is even better. So let's dig in.
Boss Hole Chronicles are brought to you by Real Good Ventures, a talent optimization firm helping organizations diagnose their most critical people and execution issues with world-class analytics. Make sure to check out all the resources in the show notes and be sure to follow us and share your feedback. Enjoy today's episode.
What we see, though, is a lot of millennials and Gen Z either aren't ready or they don't feel ready or some combination of both.
Mm-hmm.
We need to get that wisdom that is leaving at an unprecedented rate, talking to these people that aren't ready or don't feel ready, whether they recognize they have an issue or not. How do we bridge those gaps and get these people with fundamentally different operating systems talking to one another?
Yeah.
That's where the book focuses and really tries to give you a lot of structures, frameworks, and literally tactical things to try to figure out what works for your organization and what doesn't. And I think where a lot of organizations are getting this wrong is they think it can happen at offsite. They think we can, do this thing and have an event. It's going to be a lot more like a diet and exercise plan.
Well, and I think that brings to mind this question then. What do we do if the appetite, or maybe appetite isn't the word, but the endurance? Like, what if people in my generation, which is Gen X and boomers and others, don't want to or aren't willing to build the muscles needed to do this work?
I mean, I think it's a choice. In parenting, we have hard consequences. And I think, leadership is probably going to have to learn some lessons the hard way. I was just recently speaking at a conference, and the audience was largely of a single gender, of a single ethnicity,
Mm-hmm.
of a single age group. And you can probably guess all of those things by what I'm saying. And we got to the end of the presentation. If you've read any of the book, you know that it's really presenting the kind of the Gen Z point of view as a fresh lens and a new way to look at things. And a person in the audience said at the very end, he said, this sounds like you are, telling us how to think like them. Who's teaching them the way things are done?
Mm-hmm.
And I looked at him and I said, well, are you short of ideas of what to teach the youngest in our midst? And he said, absolutely not. And I said, well, are they hearing you? And he said, no. And I said, well, there's your problem.
Mm-hmm.
So you can have all the ideas in the world, but if people aren't hearing you, then we have a communication problem. So and it's a great friend of mine, Moji Akinde, full credit to her. My favorite quote that I've heard is, do you want to be right or do you want to make change?
Yeah.
So I think to any leaders that think that they don't have to change, like, you can be right, you may be right. Well done. But you're going to choose the consequences if you want to make change or if you just want to be right.
That's so powerful. I know that many of us human beings, we're unaware that we live this way, but we live in this sort of to-me consciousness. Jim Dethmer talks about this in his work, the 15 Commitments of Conscious Leadership. But when you're in a to-me state, you are technically below the line, activated, triggered, committed to being right, having a posture, if you will, and unknowingly organizing all your facts and everything that you view and see to support that posture. And I think that is probably more people than I would hope. There's a lot of us that are working hard to be in by me consciousness. In other words, at choice, the choice you're describing here. And I just think this is such an important message and opportunity for our listeners. I have a story in my head that says many of our listeners are people that have to deal with boss holes, and they're just, hungry for ideas and thoughts. And maybe it's a little encouraging to say, I'm not the only one. But if there are leaders out there who are really listening to this, could they appreciate and understand that there is a choice? Like, you are responsible for the choice, and maybe they need a little encouragement. You know what? It doesn't maybe feel like you have what it takes. And instead of admitting that or being worried about that, you maybe posture and say, "This isn't the right thing to do, and I'm the boss, and this is the way it's gonna be." But no, you really do have you are capable of so much more than you
Mm,
know. And
mhm,
that choice, that ability to put your pride and ego aside, to get off it, that to recognize that analog is ridiculously out of date, but it's all we know how to do, and that there is a better and different way.
mhm,
Wow. I mean, I think that's so cool. And it's this day and age where if you don't do that, I don't think you're gonna survive. Your organization may have some success, but it's not sustainable.
mhm, mhm,
The
mhm,
empathy, the psychological safety that we have to create to be that learning organization, to be in the space of what can we create. If you're not willing to do what you need to do to build it, I would say maybe hit the road now. Okay,
mhm.
that's pretty sharp, but what are your thoughts? What are your thoughts?
I mean, I agree with you. I think what's happening is the people with those mindsets are gonna be outmoded. They may already
Yeah.
be, they just don't know it yet.
Yes.
So, I would say Deb Golden wrote the foreword to the book. Deb is the Chief Innovation Officer at Deloitte,
Yes.
runs a massive, massive business unit, and one of my favorite lines in there is, innovation, it rarely solves because of lack of new ideas, but rather
Mhm.
the inability to let go of the old ones.
Yeah.
And I think that that is a really powerful message. If you watch her TEDx talk, it's all around kind of rethinking and unlearning, which I think is one of the most challenging things to do. And actually, when she interviewed me to write the forward, the hardest question anyone has ever asked me in any of these interviews was, "What is one of these rules that you are struggling, Amanda, to let go of?"
Ah.
I was like, "Oh, geez, there's a lot of them. There's a lot of them because it's really hard when you've grown up with certain norms to recognize that maybe this isn't normal or it doesn't have to be, and we could let go of that." And
Yeah.
and I can't tell you how many, texts I got from early reviewers that were like, "This really pisses me off, and here's the 10 reasons why this pisses me off, but as I get past it, I kinda want that too."
Yes.
And so I think, what my hope for this book is, we did in 2020, we did, a lot of, research on behalf of the Black community for the interior design industry, which was really important with everything going on with George Floyd and what was happening at that moment.
Yes.
For, the interior design industry has, historically just existed in a very monochromatic sphere,
Yep.
if you will.
Sure.
And one of the most impactful moments from that research was we have to stop calling it DEI, because when you put it in conference room D and you call it DEI, the people that most need to hear it don't show up. You
Mm.
have to put it on the main stage and you have to make it sound universal appealing, or the people that need to hear it most won't show up. And I think that that is, like this but different. I don't want to compare it to that because it's, there's a lot of emotions there that I'm still learning about because they're not my lived experience.
Sure.
But in the same way, we have to get this message in front of leaders that need to hear it the most. And this is what we do at Think Lab at my company is we often say that line from My Big Fat Greek Wedding, um, be the neck that turns the head.
Yes.
So this is it's a scene in My Big Fat Greek Wedding where the mother is trying to convince the father of something, and she says, "The man, he is the head of the household, but the woman, she is the neck, and the neck can turn the head."
Yeah.
I think when I walk into rooms, like the one at the conference that I was describing, if I was to wag my finger and give everyone the checklist of what they need to do to fix this problem, I don't think they would do it.
Right.
But if we can set up the tension, and I often start my talks with a game of would you rather, like one of my favorite ones to start with is would you rather jump ahead 10 years or go back to the way things were 10 years ago?
Wow.
And most people, the majority of people pick jump ahead 10 years. Then we get them talking about their challenges with Gen Z. And they're like, this is awful. That's awful. Everything is awful. Right. So, okay, you want to jump ahead 10 years, but this isn't good right now. How do we fix that gap? That's an example of being the neck that turns the head. And we show them some data and some research that could help them move from here to here. But they still have to be the one to make the choices to do the work.
Mm.
Hannah, let's bring you back into this conversation. I'm curious, as I talk about all this, I think one of the most interesting things in our ongoing Gen Z research, the research from this year, is we have, so for us, it's looking at the interior design industry. And we have a dozen hand-selected Gen Zers that are part of our Gen Z cohort. And we have a dozen leaders that are basically champions for those Gen Zers within their firms. So the champions say, these are the challenges for our firms. And then we brainstorm with Gen Z how to solve it. And the champions help them, socialize those and integrate them. It's really getting these dialogue going. We did a survey to kick off that work, and one of the most shocking things was we were asking something very industry specific about selecting product, and 70% of our Gen Z cohort said, nothing, I know it all. And that was shocking to the cohort. They were like, what were we smoking that day? We must have been having a really good day. I don't know. But it was really shocking to the champions too, and I think highlights that sometimes Gen Z doesn't know what they don't know. As you hear me and your mom talking here, like, where does this strike you? Like, what shocks you about this conversation?
Well, it's interesting. I feel like a lot of the conversations around generations that I'm involved in, a lot of the time they highlight what Gen Z can do or can bring to kind of combat some of the beliefs that Gen Z is lazy or they don't want to be in person, if they don't want to work. So to me, I get kind of lost in the sauce sometimes because the way I've experienced Gen Z is that there's a need for a great deal of support when they get into the workplace. And I'm not sure if that stems from maybe just some part of our childhood growing up, some of those defining moments in our world, in our history, where political unrest, lots of things going on, where there's just maybe a little bit of extra support needed or wanted. But I have heard on occasion that there's this kind of a pump the brake when I get there, when I get in the door, like I have the ability to put an impact or put a thumbprint on right away, which I think is a good thing. Like I want thoughts to be shared and for those thoughts of Gen Z to be listened to as well. But I don't often hear or have conversations where we get to hear from the other generations. And it's mostly like, Gen Z, what do you think here? Or what could we do different? But almost by asking that, sometimes I feel like we miss the opportunity to learn from the older generation. I'm not sure if that thought came full circle, but I do think it's interesting. A lot of the conversations I've had center on Gen Z instead of maybe enlightening Gen Z in some ways. And I'm not sure if that's shown up in some of the research or what you've heard from Gen Z as well. But that's what I've experienced so far.
I would say first and foremost, that means you work in a good place where they're trying to listen to you. But I would say, if you find yourself in those conversations again, go back to these business challenges. I think that starting with these business challenges is really, a great point because we don't know what we know. Sometimes, it's Donald Miller calls it the bias of knowledge, right? Like we've just been living this life this whole time. It's just the air that we breathe. And so this is why I like starting with those business challenges, because I think if we can name what those challenges are, it gives you maybe something that you can help solve. And, I think that this is interesting to me because I was a new entrant to the workforce at one time. And I didn't know what I didn't know, but the difference for your generation is I think things weren't moving as fast as they are right now.
Yeah.
And I think that that's a piece of what's so overwhelming. We've gone from a high friction, slow change time period to a low friction, high change. And I think that's what's got everybody worried is, are we raising a generation with no grit that can't push through these problems? Like, I think it's really that they don't, everything feels like DEFCON 5, right? Like everything or DEFCON 1, I don't know my military terms, but whatever, like super, super big emergency, like everything is wrong. There's a great book called Factfulness. It's an older book by, he's got a German name, Hans somebody, that is really, really interesting because it talks about, although we're feeling all of this panic right now, Hans Rosling. That's who it is. We're feeling all of this panic. And I would say, even in our research, like we started a podcast when all those tariffs started. Like it was like Chicken Little, sky is falling. What's going to happen? Like with all these tariffs, what is this going to mean for our industry? You can imagine interior products. Like it was a lot. Guess what? Everybody finished the year at or ahead. Now, it was a lot of chaos in between, like raise prices, drop prices, like do this, do that, change this, change that. It was a lot of chaos. But in the end, it worked to be at or above. And guess what? For 2026, everyone's also projecting at or above where they were. And so I think, remembering things are getting better and naming what those challenges are in a way that they feel solvable and not overwhelming, because some of what is burning everybody out right now is this mental load of not knowing.
So, Amanda, just have to ask you, this is an amazing body of work. What does working for what's next personally mean to you?
Yeah, I struggled with this question a little bit. I thought about it in advance, and I would say my short answer to that is that my struggles were worth it.
Mhm.
I talked about kind of this slow change, high friction world that we're moving from to this fast change, low friction world. And I think
Yeah.
that there's a lot of worry that we're raising a generation without grit.
Yes.
There's a lot of worry because of all of this access and so many options, whether we're talking about, marriage and what it's meaning for the dating world, or whether we're talking about loyalty and what it means for the corporate world. But I think really beautiful things come out of struggle.
Hmm.
And I think that as I look at the message in this book, it was really born out of a lived experience that I had trying to navigate a work system as a working mother. And it was a shocking discovery to me to find that a lot of what Gen Z is asking for is so close to what I needed at that time. Again,
Mm.
going back to it's not lowering the bar, it's widening the door. I think a lot of our world is struggling to really rethink and unlearn, let go of some of these norms that they had. And I think that, what success would look like to me is if in 10 years, some of these changes in the book that feel shocking right now are so normal that it feels like, well, no duh. Like I hope that some of this is like if you think back, like 20 years ago, like we could smoke in restaurants, right?
Yeah.
Like that was normal. And now if you saw someone light up in a restaurant, it would be like crazy. Like what are you
Uh-huh.
doing? There was ashtrays on planes. Does
Right.
anybody remember that?
I do.
So my hope is, maybe it's a decade, maybe it's 20 years from now. My hope is a lot of what's in this book seems really obvious in 10 years.
Mhm.
But
Love it.
for now, it feels like maybe these challenges that I had were really worth it and helped create a message now that people can act on.
If I can just add one thing that I'm so glad that's your answer to this question, that I think it's helpful for all generations, but especially for Gen Z, when now that I'm thinking more about it and the need to kind of have all the answers and get in the workplace and just assumingly to know that I'm supposed to know what to do. And I think about, okay, we have AI, I can ask ChatGPT this, I should know this. But hearing you say that, I think it's powerful for all generations, but especially Gen Z to know that the heart is good and that
Mhm.
when time passes and we struggle through, we find a way, and we especially find a way when we do it together. So I'm glad to share that with our audience. That's very powerful. Thank you.
I love that you picked up on that. And I think that that is, an exciting thing about this book too, is this empowerment message is,
Mhm.
like Hannah, to you and all your generation, like what is hard? What do you see that's wrong? And how are you empowered to go about fixing it? Because I think that a lot of the beautiful things in life come from struggles. And I think that, things may be moving faster and more frictionless than ever, but there are still things that are fixable.
Yes.
I
This
love
is
that.
amazing. One last question.
Yeah.
So, for a boss who's listening, for a leader who's getting it, like, oh my gosh, this is powerful. What's one thing they can do this week to start improving their culture?
I mean, first of all, of course, invite them to buy the book.
Yes, buy the book.
Work for what's next, because there's so many ideas in there. It's really hard for me to just narrow it down to one.
Hmm.
But I will also say, like, just start the conversation with your team. I think everyone wants a great culture, but culture is the outcome, not the start.
Mm.
And I think that this empowerment issue, while it is a very loud Gen Z issue, what you will find is that, it's an issue for all generations, right? And you want your people engaged. We're seeing that statistically fall off, 2 years in a row. We talked about that Gallup survey. It's concerning. And I think that the biggest place that you can start is start by opening the door to the dialogue, start by asking your team, maybe start a book club because there's so many ideas in here. I
Yes.
wish that I had a checklist to give you. And if you do everything in the book, your culture will be magically better. But unfortunately for everybody, it's going to be diet and exercise, and subscribing
Yes.
to the gym without working out there is not going to fix it for you.
Yep. There's no Ozempic here. You got to go do the reps. So good. Wow. We will make sure, Amanda, that people have a link to the book in our show notes, to your TEDx, your TED Talk, powerful TED Talk, and anything else that we need to make sure they know about you. Anything that you've referenced here in the podcast, we'll make sure we link to that. Thank you so much for your insights and for this incredible body of work. And we cannot wait to see where all this goes.
Wonderful. And thank you so much for including me in this multi-generational conversation. So Sara, I loved your vision and Hannah, I loved your ideas too. So I hope that you guys can put these into practice within your organization too. So thanks so much for having me.
Yeah. Thank you so much. We'll see you next time on the Boss Hole Chronicles.
Thanks very much for checking out this episode of the Boss Hole Chronicles. It was so good to have you here. And if you have your own Boss Hole story that you want to share with the Boss Hole Transformation Nation, just reach out. You can email us at mystory@thebossholechronicles.com. Again, mystory@thebossholechronicles.com. We'll see you next time.